Welcome to Sewer Mutant, the podcast that takes you way underground to excavate comics you won't find anywhere else. You've probably heard of The Crow, James O'Barr's tale of revenge that became a film, TV show, and pop culture phenomenon. But O'Barr did a few lesser-known works that I've been obsessed with for years. For this episode, I'm joined by John Ekleberry, a longtime James O'Barr fan behind the site Shattered in the Head, and more recently, the James O'Barr Collector site. So we'll be talking about James O'Barr's work, but first I want to thank Crudler for letting us use his music on the show. Please check out his link to Bandcamp in the show notes. And now, without further ado, welcome to the show, John.
Awesome to be here. Always happy to talk about my obsessions, this being one of them.
Cool. Yeah. So I figured we could probably just start by just talking about how we both got into James O'Barr.
Yeah, I like so many other people came to it through the film. I was just a little bit too young to have caught the film in theaters. I wish I would have, but a friend that was a couple years older than me showed it to me on VHS, probably like 1995, and it just stuck with me. It was the right time. I would have been 14 years old at that time, and that was just a work that really stuck with me. And I learned that it was based on a comic. I was already into comics, but not really underground stuff. I was into, X-Men and that kind of thing. And found out about, underground comics through that, Kitchen Sink Press. I mail ordered a copy of the graphic novel from them. And, reading that graphic novel for the first time was really an experience that it was so different than the film. I love the film, and I don't, not to take anything away from the film, but the graphic novel pulled me in so much deeper. And it was two completely different experiences. I feel like the book and the movie are just two different animals entirely. And that really just kind of became ground zero for, wanting to explore the other works of James O'Barr, wanting to see all the other Crow stuff that came later. And then, anything associated with the film. I watched all of Brandon Lee's films. I watched all of Alex Proyas's other films afterwards. Got into some other underground comics, Caliber, Kitchen Sink, all of that.
Cool. Yeah, I actually, the first thing I read by him was Frame 137 from Dark Horse Presents. I was only like 11 years old, but and I guess the first time I even saw James O'Barr stuff, it was Crow related. It was in the issue 12 of Wizard magazine. They had an article on Tundra, and so there was like just an image of one of the Tundra Crow books, and it was just such a striking image. I just hadn't seen anything quite like it. And then I got the issue of Dark Horse Presents that has Frame 137 in it, just because I was looking for Sin City. There's a lot of, like Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, like all those Image guys were like, and anytime they were interviewed, they'd say, oh, Sin City is amazing. It's like completely different from anything that Image was putting out. But, I wanted to read that. And so that was the only issue of Dark Horse Presents my comic shop had. And, that was just, I had never seen, anything like it. They're like the main characters taking drugs. And, it's just, there's, the rock references, the music and fashion of it. Like, it's only 4 pages, but it's just been in my head rent free, like ever since, just this amazing thing. And then, I found the film later. I also didn't see it until it was on VHS. And I don't know if it just didn't come to the theaters where I lived. I grew up in rural Texas and Wyoming. So something like seeing stuff like The Crow then was, was just like mind blowing, because there was just not, there weren't a lot of like goths and like rock culture around where I was living. So there was a lot of, for me, just the subcultural elements of it were just fascinating. And, it just was like, this is what I've been looking for in my entire short life up to that point. And just like I saw the movie, then had to go get the comic. And it is so, the movie does a great job of capturing a lot of the elements of the comic, but they're still just incredibly different. And some of the depth of emotion that's in the comic that I really haven't seen in almost any other comic, which I guess is kind of segues into I was just talking about, what is it about James O'Barr's work that really, you know, we're I don't know how old you are, but I'm 40 years old, and so I've been into this stuff since I was 11. So, decades of kind of obsession with this stuff. Like, what is it you think that is so appealing about his work?
I mean, to start, it's just the universal themes, right? I mean, it's about love and death. I don't think you can get any more universal than that. I'm also 40, and so I came to this stuff when you're at the right age to be, have a work kind of almost become part of you, right? It becomes part of your lexicon, and how you relate to other things that you read and you see. I don't know if there's another work that's as important to me as that film and that book. There's others that I love, but yeah, I think it's that. But beyond that, I think his work has kind of a truth and a realism to it. It tells the truth in a way that great fiction does. You know, there's humor. There's a I love that the graphic novel reprints almost every piece of art that's featured in the books, but one of the ones that it doesn't, in the inside back cover of the Crow #1, the first Caliber issue, there's a pinup and then there's the next issue blurb, right? And it says next issue, nothing is explained and things start to get violent. And I always thought that was fun because in Hollywood they have to have a reason for things. Like in the movie, there's a reason why they're killed. There's a way that he kind of relives his memories. There's a plot device for that. There was even the Skull Cowboy plot device that was cut out that would explain to the viewer what was going on. But the book just drops you in and just takes you for a ride. You don't really even know until the fourth issue what the hell's going on, really.
That's a really interesting aspect of it is like now the Crow is like such a known entity in pop culture that it's not confusing. We kind of know like, oh yeah, this is a guy that whatever iteration of it, it's a guy or a woman or I guess there hasn't been a non-binary crow yet, but anyway, that it's a person who's come back from the dead to seek vengeance. Like that it's very clear to us now what's going on. But when those books first came out, people had no idea what to make of them. I've been looking at like or like early reviews from 1989 when the comics were first coming out, and the reviewers are like, "I love this. This is amazing. I don't know what this is. Like this character looks weird. Kind of looks like a vampire." Like there's like James O'Barr has mentioned a number of times in interviews that like for the film that somebody floated the idea of Michael Jackson as the actor, and that was actually in like an Amazing Comics review in 1989. They said he looks like a combination of Michael Jackson and the Joker or something like that. So it was like people did see different things in that character, and yeah, it is like hard to kind of like put oneself back in that mindset to think about like picking up the Crow #1 or Caliber Presents #1 and wondering like, who is this guy? What does he want? Why is he killing these people? Um, yeah, it was all very very confusing and strange. Um, yeah, I think for me, like for the Crow in particular, it's that depth of emotion that yeah, it's what I can come back to. I look at it now and I can see a lot more flaws in it, the comic, than I did when I was first seeing it when I was 13 or 14. Both in terms of some of the inconsistent artwork, uh, the way the writing, he doesn't really face ever any real challenges or setbacks or anything like that. It's just like, just go, go, go. He's always winning. But despite all of that, and despite all the comics that have come out since then, and just the range of types of comics and content that's out there now, just the way he was able to put onto paper, like just the pain and the love and the longing and the anger, like all these things, just yeah, there's I can't say it's the only thing that does it, but uh, there are few he has few peers in that regard of just really managing to yeah, just make visible on the page the these particular emotions.
It's interesting too. You brought up the fact that in the book he kind of just proceeds without any roadblocks, right? But for me, it's kind of an important component that kind of catapults it past, a Death Wish kind of fantasy to me, because there's no stakes for Eric. He's dead already, right? Like, he's already lost his life, and it's an important component to me that not only is he avenging someone else, but he's also lost his own life and his own future. And so when he returns, um, it's biblical, right? He's the flood. Like, he's not just going after the people that came after him, but he just kind of wholesale just cleans the streets, right? Like, he just comes in and wipes everyone out. And even the inconsistencies in the art are interesting to me, because you really see James O'Barr grow as an artist over the course of the book. From those early pages and then into the stuff that he's doing in the double size finale, his art really grows. And his art's continued to grow over the years. It's been a little frustrating to me that he hasn't published as much as I would like, but the internet's a wonderful thing, because you can see tons and tons and tons of his artwork online in various places, and you really see how he's kind of gone beyond comics. He's really more of a fine artist at this point, I feel like, but enjoying some of that stuff. But like I said, I'd like to see some of it published, and I would really like to see some more sequential art. From him, we had previously talked about the fact that a huge number of his sequential pages came out in 1989. I was looking today, doing some tallying of pages, and then the other year really is 1992. And other than those 2 years, there's not a lot. There's not a lot. It's easy to be a fan because there's not that much stuff to pick up.
Yeah, and that was, I guess, transitioning over to our, our own respective websites. That was a big part of what when I started my fan site called Temple to Sadness in the '90s. I probably started in '96 or '97. I can't remember. There were a ton of Crow websites at that point, but there wasn't a whole lot on the internet about James O'Barr and what comics he had done. So all I knew about was Frame 137 and The Crow. I had no idea if there were others out there. Even though I was on the internet, like we think about like internet and pre-internet, but like old internet, a lot of times you would, find stuff, find holes in the information, I guess. And so one day I went to a comic store in Bozeman, Montana. We were up visiting my grandma in Bozeman, and they just happened to have a whole bunch of Caliber Presents, and so they wanted a fortune for Caliber Presents #1, but they had #2, and it was obviously a James O'Barr painted cover. And I later got, I think it's issue 3 that has the IO cover, but I don't think I got it in that same trip. But I definitely got it from the same store, so I got those and was like, wow, here's some more James O'Barr comics that I didn't know existed at all. So I knew at that point there was Frame 137, IO, and Gideon's, and so I made this website and put I scanned some panels from Frame 137 and Gideon's, and tried to do more of a fan site that was focused on the comics and about O'Barr's work, and just went about that. I think that's when I really started obsessively trying to find out stuff about him and his work, so I could put it on that website. And yeah, I guess because looking at the archive of that, your name comes up in my James O'Barr bibliography, and your website, Shattered in the Head, had what at the time I think was like the most complete bibliography of his work. So yeah, I mean, so that's the story behind my site. How did Shattered in the Head come together?
Well, that was really the impetus for it, is just having that bibliography up. I didn't know if I was going to do more than that, but I wanted there to be some place that you could see that there was more than just the Crow to be found. And so we're talking early internet, pre eBay. I'm trying to go to shops and dig through bins. Fortunately, I have two good comic shops at the time by me. One of them's still around. And one of them had like a drawer of kind of indie stuff that I went and dug through, and I was able to get a lot of that early stuff. I was able to get a lot of the Dead World books out of there, of which he did a bunch of covers, really cool covers for. I really like those covers. And The Choke, #2, he did a cover for that, and it had a reprint. But I just wanted that bibliography up there. And then beyond that, I kind of decided that I'd flesh it out and kind of do a little blurb about each of the stories. Um, and the idea was is that I was just not going to bother doing The Crow because there were enough other websites that did The Crow. That was going to be the last thing that I did a write up for. And in fact, I never got around to it. I never really finished that website. It was a GeoCities website, and it's still out there because when GeoCities shut down, all that was ported over. I don't know if somebody just decided they didn't want that stuff to be lost, or what, but all those GeoCities sites are still out there, just under a slightly different web address. So you can still find that website out there. I'd thought about going back and maybe completing it over the years, and then the further and further I got away from that, I thought, well, this is pretty obscure. Nobody's going to see this anyway. And so I actually copied the bibliography. I expanded it to the current day, whatever year that was, and I put it on James O'Barr's Wikipedia page so that people could find that stuff. And then sometime around 2012, I did the last update to it where I turned it into like a sortable table. And so if you go to his Wikipedia page, that bibliography there is something that I added just because I wanted people to be able to find that stuff and be able to go beyond The Crow. And now, that's 10 years ago. I don't know what happened to 10 years, but I should probably go back and update the table and add all the new stuff that he's done. It's mostly covers since then. It's mostly covers that he's done for people, and some work outside the comic industry, like album covers and things like
Yeah,
that.
unfortunately, even counting covers and things like that's still not that many things. I mean, what do you think? You think there's like 6 to 10 things maybe that aren't on that list already that have come out? It's not.
Well, I mean, if you don't count the IDW stuff, so he did a lot of variant covers for the IDW
Okay,
Crow
yeah,
series that started in 2012, and so there's a lot of. I was happy to get a lot of his artwork that way, since he hadn't published that much since then. But it's a very slow trickle of his stuff that has come out, and he's had a lot of starts on things after The Crow that he didn't complete. Um, there was a book from 12 Gauge Comics called The Ride that was all kind of focused on cars. So different stories would have different cars in them, and he was going to do one of those, and they put out a sketchbook in 2006 or 7, where he talks about his history of being an auto mechanic and some of the cars he owned, and shows some of the preliminary artwork. And it looks like it's kind of like almost a continuation of the slave cylinder stuff from Bonesaw. But that never came to fruition. Another book called Sundown that I had seen art at conventions in the early 2000s. Back then it was called Sundown in Hell, and he would show art from that, and artists popped up from time to time, and then eventually that got made into a motion comic, which was pretty cool. Too bad nobody can see it because it doesn't really exist anymore. I wish I would have been able to capture it somehow when I had it on my iPad, but I didn't. So all we have is the little preview that's available on the. I think it's still on YouTube. I don't know if the MotionWorks website exists anymore. Some of the art that I'd seen from that at conventions was really cool, and I've not seen any of that surface online. I'm sure some collector owns it, or maybe it's still in his collection. This is the thing that frustrates me. I feel like there's a bunch of just unreleased artwork that you know is in his back room or whatever, which is okay. That's an artist's prerogative to not release stuff. But as a fan, I want to see it, and I'd love for there to be another sequential story, another graphic novel that gets completed,
I mean, yeah, I mean, I
some.
would even love just to see, and I would rather have, an issue of Sundown, even if it's not the full miniseries or the full graphic novel. I'd rather have an incomplete thing that exists than than a complete thing that doesn't exist, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, it's been a long time. That apparently there was Gothic, and then he just decided not to finish that after there's some amount of artwork that's out there, and some of it was published in the form of Frame 137 and Snake Dance, but or Shadow Dance. But anyway, Snake Dance, yeah,
Snake Dance.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it's frustrating. I can understand why he wouldn't want to. His reasoning for not finishing is he just felt like he was always behind the curve on the technology, and but still, it would be great to see what was actually completed, if there was more than what was published, and or just if the Sundown motion app thing could just come out as a single issue, or I don't know how many pages there were in that. I unfortunately didn't find out about it until it had already been taken down. Uh, but I would love to have that, and that's along with the ride sketchbook. Those are kind of my white whales of the known James O'Barr stuff that's out there that I haven't been able to lay hands on yet. Um, and then as far as other uncompleted stuff, we've talked about is the Bride Crow, or I think Engines of Despair, and it seems like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Slave Cylinder in regards to the ride, and in the introduction to that, he mentions that it's the same. It's supposed to be the same character, Henry, but it seems like it's a different time period. It's because Slave Cylinder is in the far future, and it seemed like the ride was supposed to be contemporaneous, or maybe even in the past. But the same
Sure.
character
Yeah.
with a different setting. But the story looked like it was trying to cover some of the same ground as Engines of Despair, with the bride and revenge, and I assume if it's from the name Engines of Despair that there's a car component to that, but I could be wrong. In that none of the artwork I've seen from that has any cars or anything in it, but
I think she's boarding a train on one of the paintings that I've seen, which is kind of interesting. So I don't know how
oh,
much that
okay.
plays into the story, or if that's just a play on the words in the title. But that stuff, it's crazy because I've seen pieces, here and there online. I've seen a few pieces in his books that he had at conventions with him, and I just want to see that stuff. I want to see that stuff published. I think there was enough material in that Sundown motion comic to be a single issue, a 22-page comic, or whatever. And he's alluded to there being other Gothic artwork that didn't get published. At this point, I don't have any hope that story will ever be finished. But that was the first subject I focused on my blog. Was I wanted to talk about Gothic and how that story really resonated. At least the pieces that I got of it, and that's really what I want to see more of. And he talked about technology being outdated and things like that, but I think that's always the case with books and movies. I mean, we all still love Blade Runner, right? Even though that future has come and gone, and that's not the future that the world ended up having. It's still a cool world and a cool setting, and I just kind of wanted to see more of.
Yeah, I mean, if he did it now, he could do it as like a retro futuristic thing where it's just kind of deliberately not accurate in terms of like future predictions. Have you read? I'm sure you have Golgothica by John Burgeon, which is set in the same universe. So
Yeah.
I feel I'm glad at least with Golgothica and Wednesday that we got to spend some time in that world and see some of the details of that world, even if it I would still very much like to see what O'Barr was going to do with his portion of that. But and Burgeon's been working on finally finishing the last issue of Golgothica, which it started to run in the '90s and was canceled, never finished. So I don't know. So many of these things that are just out there, like almost done, tantalizingly close to being finished, and never quite materializing. It's and I mentioned known stuff. I guess another thing, like my other white whale, is to discover something that you haven't found yet, added to the bibliography, something that nobody knows about. It feels like there's
I'm sure it's out there.
it seems like there's got to be something, just with the black and white boom of the 80s, and so much material was coming out from so many publishers. And James O'Barr's his tendency to use different pseudonyms, so there could be something out there under a pseudonym that we don't recognize, and we'd only be able to identify it by the style or something. Who knows?
I also think people had tendency to like commission something from him and then like reuse it and reuse it. Like you saw this with Everett Hartsoe, the guy that created Razor, right? Like he got that one black and white sketch from O'Barr and he used it on like two different back covers, and then he used it as a cover. He colored it and used it as a cover for the book Dead Boys, and then there were like three different editions of that all used that cover. And he did like he seems to do a lot of favors for people. Like somebody will say, "Oh, can you just do this back cover or do this cover for me?" And then it's just this really obscure stuff that's out there. Like I feel like I've gotten lucky. Like some of the stuff that I've found, there's this comic from 2001 that I just so randomly discovered while going through a box, like a dollar bin box at a convention. I don't even know what possessed me to pull it out and flip it over, but he just did the back cover. Like there's just a sketch on it of this weird little sock puppet with a straight razor, and I'm like, oh my god, this is like a James O'Barr piece, and I've never seen another copy of this comic book anywhere ever. Like I can't find it on eBay, I can't find it online, but I've got my copy, so whatever, it's fine. But I feel like there's other stuff like that
Yeah,
out there. I'm sure. Like there's probably
yeah,
something that I've
yeah.
missed.
And my hope is to find some pre-Crow stuff, like in the there's this whole period of after he was in the Marines until the Crow was published, where there's only one thing that is really known, and that's unless you count Dead World, but is that G forces from Strange Tales for Marvel. And it's possible that he was just really focused on trying to get stuff out from Marvel. I know there's like some X-Men stuff, that pages that are floating around that he said was supposed to be for Marvel Fanfare, that I think was not completed, or not, definitely not published. And he was trying to do some stuff for Savage Sword of Conan, and that didn't work out. So I guess maybe it's possible that he was just really focused on sending stuff to the Marvel magazine lines in the 80s, and most of that just never saw the light of day. But he's mentioned a few times having done stuff for like fanzines. So I feel like in that, either in the 70s, when he was first starting out before the Marines, and as well as in the 80s. So I feel like there's got to be some undiscovered O'Barr pieces in like Xeroxed fanzines that had a circulation of like 100 copies or something, that probably I would have to be in the Detroit area to ever find. But I don't know. I don't know. Hope springs eternal, I guess. Um, do you have a favorite thing besides the Crow that O'Barr has done?
I think it's Snake Dance just because that's a world that I want to see more of. Like I wish there was more of that book. And one of the cool things about that book is that Golgothica, the John Bergen, the backup story, that had 4 issues published at Caliber, just like The Crow, coincidentally, and then was canceled, even though there was a 5th issue in the works. And on Bergen's old website, he talks about that 5th issue, and that 5th issue was going to cross over with the same time period and the same part of the story that Snake Dance crossed over with. So you were going to get to see those same events happen, but from the other artist's point of view, which I think is really cool. And the unpublished cover for that issue has that character, has Blixa and has Wednesday. Those 2 characters are on that cover, and I was super stoked when I saw on Instagram that not only was he going to polish up that unpublished 5th issue, but also do a 6th issue. John Bergen's Instagram has a bunch of cool stuff on it in regards to being an O'Barr fan. It's got some stuff from a Neuromancer project that they worked on and never did, that then kind of led them to doing Gothic. It's got some of the early Gothic stuff before it was even called Gothic. It was called Black Chrome, and I don't know. It's really cool. All of that stuff really interests me. That particular storyline really captured me, and that's kind of what I wrote the first post on my blog about. Was about that world and all the different indie comics that we've seen it in, and I hope that maybe we'll see it in a few more.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And to answer my own question, obviously Frame 137 is my favorite. So I guess we're both big on the unpublished Gothic stuff or unfinished Gothic stuff. But um, with the James O'Barr creator site, so you did Shattered in the Head like a million years ago. What made you decide to put out a new O'Barr website?
I'd always wanted to finish that old one, and I kind of just decided that rather than going back to that ancient format, that ancient GeoCities format, that maybe I could do something a little more contemporary. And also, selfishly, I kind of just wanted to like get all my stuff photographed that I have. And if I was less lazy, there would be more posts. Maybe I'll do a couple more this year. Talking to you has certainly made me want to make some more posts, but I just kind of want to have a snapshot out there of all the stuff that I've encountered, so that other collectors can try to hunt it down, or at least be aware of it, and see it. Uh, yeah, I don't know. My first post was all about Gothic, and I was kind of going to do the same thing I did with Shattered in the Head, where I kind of just did the Crow last, because there's enough Crow stuff out there, enough people know about it. But then I decided to kind of work my way through chronologically, and doing the Caliber years, you have to talk about Crow, So I went through the Dead World stuff and the Crow stuff, and it still just blows me away that really it's 1989 is just the big year. Dead World 10 comes out at the end of 88, and then most of his stuff comes out in 89, a few covers in 1990, but really 1989 is the year. And then you don't see anything for a couple years, and then Tundra picks up, so I'll have to do an article picking up with Tundra and going forward.
Yeah, cool. Because there's also the North Star stuff that came out around that same time. We haven't talked about that at all. Not that there's much to, again, like there's not a whole lot there. So there's not a lot of material to discuss, but that's another unfinished project is I think Zeitgeist was the name of that, the thing he was doing there. And like he was still talking about it as late as like 2000. So there might be unpublished Zeitgeist stuff even that's out there that, or is in some collector's collection or in his basement or something somewhere. Uh, but yeah, just so many things that hopefully will someday see the light of day, but might not.
Well, nor it's funny. I was mentioning how like our Everett Hart, so took one pinup and he kind of used it in five different places, and I feel like North Star did that with the Zeitgeist stuff. Like, there's two or three different books that have like a 2-page preview, of this story, and then they got 3 covers out of it. The first 3 issues of oh geez, what is it called? Is it called Splatter? No, it's called
Slash, I think.
Thank you,
Yeah,
thank you, Slash. The first 3 issues of Slash have Zeitgeist covers, but there's only 8 pages of sequential story.
yeah.
You get 3 covers, but you only get 8 pages of story, and it's billed as part 1, but we never see a part 2 or anything else to go along with it.
No, not nothing else. And yeah, it's a funny thing. He hasn't meant. It's not one that he has talked about a lot, but said like it was still coming up years later. Many years after that one single chapter was published. So yeah, that one's not really one of my favorites by him, but nonetheless, if there's more pages, I would still love to see those. So yeah, I think we've covered a lot of his career. I guess there's still just like those scant things of the over the last few years. I think the big thing would be Skinning Wolves, which he did the breakdowns for. I'm just suddenly forgetting his name, Terry, Jim Terry.
Jim
Yeah,
Terry. Yeah.
um, and that's like really his last big comics thing that's been published, other than covers, is or the Curare and Skinning Wolves. Was it seemed like he was a little bit more actively involved in the art side of Skinning Wolves, though.
We got a lot of good covers on the other one on
Mm-hmm.
QRA too. Like I like that when IDW picked up the license, they got John Shirley, one of the screenwriters from The Crow, to do a series, and I didn't love the book itself, but hey man, I got 5 O'Barr covers out of it. with those retailer incentives, because IDW loves to do those variant covers. And also the main covers for that series were done by Kyle Hotz, and like he's done some cool Crow artwork over the years that I've seen online. Like he did the and also published like when IDW repackaged all the kitchen sink press books, Kyle Hotz did the covers for those too, and they're great. His work's really interesting. He's a good artist, and
Yeah, he's one of the more like
he
enduringly successful of the kind of outlaw comics people, because he started out at like Anubis Press with the Choke and stuff like that. So I think of him as part of that era of comics, and yeah, and now he's mostly doing mainstream comics, but he's still still at it, which is a little bit rare.
yeah. There's actually as far as I know, unfinished strip that he did in the Choke. I believe it was called October. That's very, very Crow-esque. But certainly James O'Barr's influence is there, and he doesn't. He talks about that. He doesn't hide that at all. That he's an O'Bar fan. Um, but he's done some really cool work over the years. There's a book called Mosaic that I would tell people to check out if they're checking out Kyle Hot stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to do that. Um, yeah, so I guess one of the other things I wanted to do on this, I guess we're touching on that subject, is talk about like other media, whether that's comics or films or books or whatever that they we would recommend to Obar fans. And so it sounds like Mosaic is one. Is there anything else that comes to mind for you?
Um, well, I love comics, but I feel like everything I love is rooted in 30 years ago, which is I'm not reading a lot of contemporary stuff. I'd actually like to get more involved. I a few years ago, discovered the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, which lots of people have, and you've talked about that before. And so I've picked up Red Room, in support of Ed Pisker, and also picked up his X-Men Grand Design, which is great. That's something that anybody that's an X-Men fan should check that out, and that's kind of a cool synthesis of the underground comic style, but a big corporate property. But as far as current books coming out, there's really nothing on the horizon that I see. I'd love to get more involved. I'd love to start going to the comic shop again, see what's out there as far as independent titles.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting work. Like in terms of being particularly similar to James O'Barr, like yeah, just there's not a whole hell of a lot that I would mention, but like one of them would Gideon Falls, which he did a cover for. So I picked it up just because of that, and I'd say it's more of a Vertigo style book, but it touches on just some of the same uh, tropes, I guess, of religious elements and urban, like strange urban settings and things like that I think would appeal. I mentioned to you the other day Bloodhorn, which was serialized in a comic called Reptile House, and it's really cartoony, more influenced by underground or alternative comic stuff, and not a not a serious like revenge story or anything, but it kind of has what reminds me of Obar in it is like the I guess just the music elements of it, and just it's just really tied into like the Philadelphia punk scene, and just like these really dense urban settings of just things under bridges and uh, underground rock clubs and stuff like that has I don't know. There's something about it, just a little bit that makes me think about stuff like Frame 137, even though it's tonally completely different, but just it has kind of that same just cool vibe of like here's some cool countercultural people doing cool countercultural stuff uh, along those lines. Then outside of comics, the movie Mandy is uh, uh, obviously it's a revenge story, so there's there's that linkage, but there's something about like the surreal storytelling that gives it sort of a comics feel, and yeah, it just reminds me of some of more of like the covers because it's color, more of like the Obar covers than something else like his interior pages. But yeah, I feel like it's something that Obar fans would enjoy.
I'll have to check that out. I watch that's a Nicolas Cage
Yeah,
film,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I watched through a lot of his early filmography last year, but I need to catch up on some of the newer stuff. And I don't know why, but when I saw the trailer for that movie, it almost had like an Evil Dead vibe to me. And so it certainly was something that seemed interesting.
Yeah, it's the director Panos Cosmatos also did Beyond the Black Triangle, I think is the name of it, which is not very similar in terms of the content of it, but the style of it, with a lot of experimenting with light and color and stuff like that in fun ways that is kind of I don't know. Yeah, Mandy's weird because it's sort of like an art film that's also just like kind of a revenge slasher movie. Like so it's like this weird mix of highbrow and lowbrow content that I guess that's also kind of fits with the Obar uh, you know, modus operandi of his work has a you know, like you said, like he's like a fine artist now. He's more doing like paintings and stuff, and I feel like the real value of his work is in that like the emotions that he's able to capture. But he does all that in like the context of these stories about violence and murder, and without a ton of like really not a lot of plot twists or like character development or anything like that.
Yeah, for media recommendations, I just finished Yellow Jackets last night, and I would say that that pulls in a lot of elements of horror and surrealism and things that I find interesting about underground comics that are also there. Kind of the grotesqueness of some of them, and that's definitely something I would recommend that people
Yeah, me
check
too.
out.
That show was great, or is great, and yeah, just like the whole '90s flashback stuff. It's a lot of fun for people our age, and hopefully for people of other ages as well. Um, cool. Well, I think we should probably wrap up soon. Is there anything else you wanted to cover or talk about in there?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I could just talk about this stuff for hours, but I think we hit most of the bases. If somebody is interested in Obar's work and they don't want to buy a zillion back issues, I kind of narrowed it down. There's a six non-crow books that you can buy, and you can get a large chunk of his pages, along with a few cool covers. So you'd want to pick up Caliber Presents #2, which has the Gideon's strip, Monster Massacre Special #1, which has Snake Dance, North Star Presents James O'Barr #1, which has all the Zeitgeist stuff, Zeitgeist, Pink Dust #1, which has the Slave Cylinder stuff and some other stuff that he did around that time. Tasty Bits #1, which has some early work from him, some pre-Crow, pre Marvel work from when he was like 14 years old. And then the remastered version of IO that John Bergen put out in 2011. It is colored, and I definitely I like the black and white version as well, but I'm not going to tell anybody to go buy a Caliber Presents #1. That's an expensive book these days. Um, that stuff was reprinted in black and white in Original Sins, the same company that put out Tasty Bits put that out. But I think the art is better reproduced in the Bergen
And
edition.
it's also nice to support something that's in print, and that where Bergen and Obar are going to get presumably some percentage of what gets of that purchase, whereas buying an original sins out of a long box somewhere, it's good because it supports your local retailer, I guess. But yeah, it's not going to put new money into the artist's pockets. So I would agree that getting the new IO book would be the way to go on that. That's the only thing I would add to that list would be the Andrew Vax Hard Looks trade paperback, because there's two
Oh yeah,
sequential
absolutely.
Obar things in there, and he didn't write them, but I think they both. I would actually recommend that over the North Star book personally, because I think those two strips in there are better than the things from the North Star book, and then you get also like all the other Andrew Vax adaptations that are in there, and oh, that would be my version of that.
There's a couple different versions of that Hard Looks trade paperback, and definitely I would say to be on the lookout for the one that has both of the O'Barr stories in it. Anytime I Want and Joyride are the two stories. There's earlier versions that only have one of them in it, and then I think there's later versions that might not have them at all. Um, so you want to hit the sweet spot with, I think it was like the second edition or something. The reason I like the North Star book is just because if we're just trying to collect as many O'Barr pages as possible, it has both Zeitgeist, and it also has the 16-page Blood Rape of the Lust Ghouls. What a title, right? And that was written by David Scow, that wrote was one of the screenwriters on The Crow. And that's kind of a, I don't know. I have a thing about doppelgangers. I like doppelgangers in my fiction, and that story is about a horror screenwriter whose evil doppelganger gives him some problems. And that was originally printed in a magazine format by North Star, but it is included in that later reprint book. Um, yeah, I don't know. I love
Yeah,
all that stuff.
yeah. I
But
wasn't wild about Blood Ghouls, which is why yeah, I would prefer the Andrew Vax ones. But yeah, you're right that, that in terms of page count, like you're better served with the North Star book because of that. But I think that the Andrew Vax adaptations like played more to Obar's strengths than the Blood Ghoul one, which I think was
oh, they're certainly in the same wheelhouse, right? Like they're both. Yeah, in fact, I looked him up today. He died in December. I didn't realize that.
yeah,
Andrew
yeah,
Vax. Yeah, but yeah, both of those stories are good, and I like the cover too of Hard Looks #3. Um, that's a good one to have in the collection. Good
yeah.
O'Barr
Actually,
cover.
Andrew Vax's books would be another recommendation for other media for Obar fans for sure. To pick up his Burke series and some of the other books he's done.
He also did a short story in a Crow collection. There was a Crow collection in '98 called "Shattered Lives and Broken Dreams," where there was like 40 or so artists and writers got together and did contributions for it. And in the original edition, there is an original Andrew Vax story. It actually doesn't appear in the paperback version or the later hardcover. There was some kind of dispute over the artwork used with it or something, but it's it's interesting to see those two, the cross section there. I certainly think that he is somebody that Obar fans would
Yeah.
dig.
Oh, Frame 137 was dedicated to him, so that's another. Yeah. Besides
Yeah.
the fact that Obar did adapt some of his stories, there, yeah, he was definitely a big fan of that work. Great. Well, I should probably let you go. Coming up on an hour now, so thanks a bunch for taking the time, and always fun to talk about James O'Barr.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I'll shout out to my childhood friend Kelsey that introduced me to the Crow, and I'll tell you that we went to a comic book convention together, and he bought this big Crow poster at the very first stand of this giant convention, and we had to lug that thing around all day long with us. It was matted on a piece of cardboard wrapped in plastic, and so for making me haul that around all day that day and making me a Crow fan, thank you.